Hi guys, I'm here at the Regina Airport, met with the Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe last night. I'm en route to Winnipeg to meet with Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister to talk to issues important for all three prairie provinces. But right now, I want to talk to you about something that's just unbelievable. Quebec is getting $1.5 billion more equalization dollars, while at the same time that it's announcing it's going to try to block a revival of the Energy East pipeline. So you may recall I was a couple of months back campaigning with the new PC Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs, and he and his government are just desperate to get Energy East, the concept of that east-west oil pipeline, back on the books. He wants that because he sees it as a great job creator for New Brunswick, and I see it as a great national unity project where we could help to ship Alberta oil down east, get a fair global price for it, and bonus, displace foreign oil imports, including from OPEC dictatorships. So Blaine Higgs came up with the proposal, and he talked to the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about it. He said, we'd like the federal government to support our effort down east to revive that pipeline. And Justin Trudeau basically gave a veto to Quebec. He said, I'm only going to do it if you can get the Premier of Quebec on side. Well, we had hoped that the new Premier of Quebec would be open to things like this, and we're going to have to work on that. But right out of the gate, Premier Legault said last week that, quotes, there is no, quotes, social acceptability for oil in Quebec. Really, Premier? Because the data tells us otherwise. Quebecers are driving around and consuming as much hydrocarbon energy, including oil, as people in the rest of Canada. It's true Quebec has a lot of hydroelectricity, but doesn't displace their dependence on gasoline and diesel. In fact, Quebecers back last year, for which we have numbers, in 2016, they consumed 355,000 barrels per day of gasoline and diesel. And most of that sourced from foreign imports. Now, thankfully, because of the Line 3 reversal, there is more Alberta oil getting up to Quebec, but still they're very dependent on imports, mainly from the U.S., but still from some OPEC countries as well. So when the Premier of Quebec says there's, quotes, no social acceptability for oil in Quebec, what does that mean? Are you going to shut down your economy, Premier? You're going to tell everybody they got to park their cars? Because there is not just social acceptability for oil, but there is a total economic dependence on it. And all we're asking with Energy East is to basically connect some pre-existing pipelines, create some relatively small ones so that we can roll Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada, partly so we can get the wealth in order to pay for equalization. And here's the second part of the story. You may recall that the Trudeau Liberals jammed a new equalization formula on the provinces, not a new one, but they renewed the current one for 5 years. And they announced that this spring, just days after Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe asked for a fairer deal for the so-called have provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, but the Trudeau Liberals said, so sad, too bad, the deal is done for 5 full years. Well, guess what? Based on that formula, it was revealed this weekend that Quebec is getting an additional $1.4 billion in equalization on top of the $9 billion it was already getting. Now, to put this in context, Quebec has a provincial budget surplus of estimated $3 billion, while in Alberta, we have a deficit of at least $7.5 billion. I think it's going to be closer to 10 by the time we get to look at the books as a prospective government next year. So Quebec has had a long run of positive economic growth. We've had the longest run of recession and stagnation in Alberta's modern economic history. Albertans contribute net about $20 billion a year, $220 billion over the past decade to the rest of the country, and Quebec is collecting now going to $10.5 billion in equalization. Look, folks, I've always said we Albertans are generous. We don't mind, and I know this is true for our friends here in Saskatchewan. We don't mind sharing some of our good fortune when times are good in our provinces and bad elsewhere. But right now, the opposite is literally true, where we have a massive deficit. Quebec has a big surplus. We have the highest unemployment outside of Atlantic Canada. Quebec has 5% unemployment. We have all of these challenges, and all we ask is the ability to develop the wealth that pays for the equalization and the transfers in the first place. So that's one of the issues I'm discussing with Premier Moe, Premier Pallister, and this is going to have to be a central issue in the next Alberta election next spring, because our NDP completely surrendered on the issue of equalization with their close friends and allies, the Justin Trudeau Liberals. We need an Alberta Conservative that will actually fight for fairness for Alberta taxpayers.